I'm back from Capitol Hill. Trans rabbis are embracing Mamdani, and Bill Gates comes out with a major update on the end of the world. I'm Michael Knowles. This is the Michael Knowles Show. Welcome back to the show. Zohran Mamdani was on the fence there for a while in New York. It was unclear as we enter the last stretch of the mayor race, but he just picked up a crucial demographic, that, of course, being transgender rabbis. We will get to that momentarily. First, though, allow me to grace you with beautiful information about Mizzen in Maine. Go to mizzenandmaine.com. Use promo code Michael20. Do you know that look good, feel good saying? Well, most dress clothes only deliver on half of that. Sure, they look sharp, but they're uncomfortable and high maintenance. That is one of the many reasons that I love Mizzen in Maine. They pioneered this whole performance dress shirt concept over a decade ago, and they've just kept perfecting it ever since. One of the many things I love about this stuff is it looks very sharp, looks very refined. It has a kind of almost, shall I say, continental styling to it. It's very, very good stuff. And it's engineered with all of these performance features. Stretchy, lightweight, moisture wicking, wrinkle-resistant fabrics that you can just throw in the wash. You don't need to worry about it. You don't need to go back and forth to the dry cleaner. You don't need to stand over that ironing board. I really, really like them, especially their polo shirts. But all this stuff is really tremendous. The moment you put on one of their shirts or pants, you feel the immediate difference. Right now, Mizzen in Maine is offering our listeners 20% off your first purchase at mizzenandmaine.com. Promo code Michael20. That is Mizzen, spelled M-I-Z-Z-E-N, and Maine, M-A-I-N.com. Promo code Michael20 for 20% off. Mizzenandmaine.com. Promo code Michael20. If you would rather shop in person, you can find Mizzen and Maine stores in select states. I am back from Capitol Hill. I had a great time on Capitol Hill yesterday. I was invited down by the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on the Constitution, Eric Schmitt. I think we're going to have Senator Schmitt joining us a little bit later. But it was on a very, very important topic and a timely topic, which is political violence. We have seen a massive upsurge in political violence. Pew Research just put out a poll a week or so ago, said that 85% of Americans think that political violence is getting worse in the United States. And even left-wing sources and outlets are admitting that political violence is now chiefly a left-wing problem. Political violence on the left has always been underreported. Let's establish that off the bat. So my thesis going in is political violence in the United States, and I guess everywhere, is chiefly, and pretty much has always chiefly been, a left-wing problem. The statistics previously made it seem like a right-wing problem. And as I pointed out in my testimony, which you can go watch on C-SPAN, and I think it's on my YouTube channel as well, the way that the statistics arrived at saying that political violence was a right-wing problem was by ignoring left-wing violence, ignoring the BLM riots, ignoring the Antifa attacks, ignoring attacks on pro-lifers and Christians and all the rest. So anyway, now the numbers cannot even be fudged anymore. It's so clear. It's a left-wing problem. Left-wingers who are surveyed, much, much more than the right, say that they will justify political violence in the wake of Charlie's assassination. This became extremely clear because you had mainstream left-wingers who were excusing, minimizing, and even celebrating Charlie's murder. I get to Capitol Hill. We walk in. I'm sworn in to testify. A few other people there. My friend Chad Wolf, former acting secretary of Homeland Security. Some other people there too. Really good witnesses. And I notice that the Democrats aren't there. One or two. The ranking member, Peter Welch, Dick Durbin showed up. But where were the Democrat members? Mazie Hirono was supposed to be there. She didn't bother to show up. Adam Schiff? Where's Adam Schiff? Adam Schiff has been crying for 4 years straight over January 6th, supposedly the worst attack in our nation's history. Adam Schiff couldn't be bothered to show up to a committee hearing on political violence. Tells you a lot about him. I look around. I didn't even see Cory Booker at first. Cory Booker, the Thracian senator, Spartacus, he wasn't there. Where was he? Now, eventually he did show up, but I thought it was very telling that Senator Booker used up all of his time to just kind of babble himself. He didn't want to interview any of the witnesses, not even the witnesses that the Democrats had called, much less the Republican witnesses. So Cory Booker used up his 5 minutes, had this to say.
The only thing that's going to get us out of this condition is for courageous leaders in both parties to start standing up and extending grace and self-introspection. It's a lot easier when I call out Chuck Schumer's comments to make a difference. And God, I wish I'd see more of my colleagues being willing to call out the President of the United States for his outrageous comments as well.
You know, I think Senator Booker made a good point just a moment ago when he said we have to self-examine, we have to be introspective. And, you know, I can't help but think of a line today. Jay Jones has the vision, commitment, and integrity to keep families safe and make sure every Virginian gets a fair shake in the justice system. I'll be working every day to ensure Jay wins this race. That's the endorsement of Senator Booker for a man who would seek to be the Attorney General of Virginia. This is a man who, if people have not been reading the news, has called for a Republican to be murdered, for his children to be murdered, for the children to die in their mother's arms in order to persuade the Republican to change his policy views, and a man who says that he would urinate on the graves of multiple Republicans. Senator Booker, in this spirit of introspection, is standing by this endorsement. So I suppose I would invite, well, perhaps I should have looked, because Senator Booker has left the room, and I think I can guess why. Senator Booker, I think, should practice what he preaches. It was a jarring moment. It was the most jarring moment of the entire hearing, I think. You have Booker, who shows up. He gives this speech. You couldn't even, his remarks went on for 5 minutes. He said, we need to sometimes walk back comments that we've made. We need to acknowledge when we were wrong. We need to be introspective. And I said, okay, well, great. This is a great opportunity. You endorsed a guy who's calling for the murder of Republicans and our kids and says he's going to urinate on the graves of Republicans. Surely you want to withdraw your endorsement, right? Surely you don't want this man to be the top law enforcement official in Virginia. There's a Cory Booker-shaped hole in the wall. Where'd he go? Hold on. He's on the other side of Washington, D.C. at that point. Completely preposterous. I mean, it was just a farce. And I think all the crocodile tears you hear from Democrats or see from Democrats are precisely that. Completely disingenuous. They try to dredge up January 6th. And then when the truth about January 6th came out, they had to go mum. So I think, in a way, it was politically very wise that the Democrats, by and large, didn't show up to the hearing yesterday. Very bad for the country, though. You would think this is one political issue we should all agree on. Political violence is bad. We should not be hashing out our political differences with blood in the streets. Unfortunately, only one party seems to take that seriously. One senator in particular takes it seriously. That would be Senator Eric Schmitt, junior senator from Missouri. Speaking of attorneys general, former attorney general of Missouri, and the author of a book, The Last Line of Defense, How to Beat the Left in Court. Senator Schmitt, thank you for coming on the show.
It's great to be with you.
You know, I'm really, really grateful that you called that hearing yesterday. It's so important. Going in, I did not have high expectations for your colleagues on the other side of the aisle, that they were going to take this issue seriously. But I am glad that we were able to get the facts on the table out there for the American people, because there's been so much misinformation on the topic of political violence. What do you think people need to know? What are the big takeaways?
I think that if we're going to get on the other side of this, Michael, we have to tell the truth about what's really happening. And that was the point of the hearing. Obviously, the impetus was the cold-blooded assassination of Charlie Kirk, shot him in the throat while he was speaking his mind at an event. And that was meant to send a message that was inscribed on the bullets. There's a deeply rooted ideology that's being celebrated right now, sort of assassination culture on the left. And I think perhaps, the killing and the murder and the assassination was chilling, but the reaction from people who are not just sort of like paid activists that you see marching around the country with George Soros, cash in their pocket, but like teachers and professors. And some of that was exposed yesterday, some of their comments in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination. But you can trace this back, and we talked about it a little bit. You go back to the Weather Underground in the 60s and the fire bombings that took place. Those people were never really held accountable. Many of them were promoted to professorships. Bill Ayers, for example, was celebrated, hosted a fundraiser for Barack Obama when he ran for office the first time. And now you're seeing the full culmination of this ideology that knows that they can't really win at the ballot box, so they've resorted to terrorism. And I think that, like I said, if we're going to be honest, we have to talk about what's really going on. This isn't a both sides thing. Just take this into account.
Yeah.
It just in the polling, we could go through the litany of terror attacks and violence that's come from the left in the last year and a half, beginning with President Trump's 2 attempted assassinations and Charlie Kirk and everything in between. But the truth is, 25% of those who describe themselves as very liberal were willing to tell a pollster, Michael, that political violence is justified. Over half of those on the left side of the ledger, 55%, believe that it's at least somewhat justifiable to kill President Trump. Okay? You put that 25% number I cited, there's 3% of those who describe themselves as very conservative would say the same thing. That's within the margin of error of 0, but it's also, if that's true, it's 3% too many, right? But don't tell me that that's the same thing. That's a huge disparity, and you see it play out, I think, in the conduct of so many now who resorted to political violence.
Of course, of course. You mentioned the weather underground here, and I thought it was really rich because the Democrats, the only thing that they could bring up was January 6th, supposedly the worst attack in our nation's history. And I was reminded of a few facts. One person was killed in political violence on January 6th. There was a military veteran and a Trump supporter who was killed by a trigger-happy cop. Secondly, there have been many attacks on the U.S. Capitol over the course of history. So even if you want to lump in the demonstrations of January 6th, fine. Okay, you've got that one. You mentioned the weather underground. They blew up a building in the Senate in 1971. You've got 1983, the Maoism Armed Resistance Unit blew up another building in the Senate. You have 1954, Puerto Rican radicals shot up the House gallery, injured 5 members of Congress. You have 1915, a left-wing Harvard professor, not a lot changes, blew up a room in the Senate, reception room, because he was protesting capitalism. So, okay, I've got five attacks that I'm counting there. One of them involves a silly hat. 4 of them involve explosives. All of the explosive ones were perpetrated by the left. So even on the one example that they want to cite, even there, I think it's clear the problem comes from the left chiefly. And I don't mean that I don't say this just to score political points, but the ranking member, Peter Welch, he opened up the hearing and he said, look, we all say political violence is bad, but it's both sides. And if you ever suggest it's one side or the other, that's unacceptable. This is ironic, one, because they've been blaming the right forever based on nothing. But 2, how are you supposed to solve the problem if you won't acknowledge where the problem lies?
Well, there's a few things going on here at the same time. One is they keep citing this study of right-wing political violence, and I tried to point out and entered into the record how that's been totally debunked. Essentially, they didn't include any violence that stemmed from any protests. So take 2020, of all the billions of dollars worth of damage that took place there, cops being assaulted, all the things that happened. In St. Louis, where I'm from, there was a police officer murdered for helping guard the store of his friend in one of those evenings. So they don't count any of that stuff. The only one they did count was Charlottesville. Any kind of, so it's absolutely skewed.
Right.
They know that studies are junk, and so we've now asked for the Department of Justice, let's give us a real study because we know what the answer is. This is the byproduct of an ideology that is by any means necessary. They don't believe in real free speech like you and I do. They only believe in that if it works to their benefit. But if it doesn't work and they can't convince, the left is willing to resort to violence. We've seen it time and time again. I would also point out, in addition to the political violence, they used that as January 6th as justification for the worst weaponization of our Department of Justice we've ever seen. The January 6th committee was a predicate to Jack Smith. 3 days after President Trump announced he's running for president, all these investigations start literally to put their political opponent in prison for the rest of his life.
That's right.
Arctic Frost spied on members of the Senate. I was the chair of the Republican Attorneys General Association at the time. They did the same thing there. You think of who they tried to sweep up. So you've got the weaponization of government, the whole of government against political enemies on the left. And then you also have this political violence now that's taken hold too. So we are, I think, at an inflection point as a country, and we're never going to solve it if we just say that this is a both sides thing in this moment, because it is not. The facts do not bear that out. So we have to have the courage to say, this is a real problem on the left. And unfortunately, I don't see the kind of, the reflection that so many talked about when it's so obvious. I mean, you pointed out the attorney general candidate in Virginia the Democrat, who wanted to murder the guy's kids, his opponent's kids, to teach everybody a lesson. I've been an attorney general. Like, you want people in that office who have some sort of restraint, because there's a lot of things you can do with that kind of power. You're the only one who can make a charging decision in many instances. And if that's abused by somebody who, doesn't have their bearings, to put it lightly, that's a real problem. But you don't hear any Democrat calling for that guy to step down. So this is a deeply rooted problem, Michael, on the left. And I don't see their willingness to kind of take that on. And, finally, I think Antifa came up a lot in that hearing, and rightfully so. It's not some ideology, as some people have tried to dismiss it as. It is a well-organized machine that's hell-bent on violence, murder, and they have safe houses everywhere. So we aim to get at that as well.
I think it was really important that Republicans brought the receipts on this, even just on the point of Antifa. It's not just an idea floating in outer space. I can tell you the names of the networks. I can give you the email addresses where people can donate through tax-exempt nonprofit organizations to fund organized left-wing terror cells. This is a real concrete phenomenon. So anyway, I think it's just really wonderful. One, the Trump administration, the White House is designating Antifa as a domestic terror organization, is trying to go about and dismantle it. I think it's very, very important that you've taken the leadership on Capitol Hill. And at the very least, some Republicans have joined in and are going to take this issue seriously, because you can't get at the problem unless, one, you start actually counting the instances of left-wing terror. You get good data on it. You track down where the money is going, where it's flowing, where these terror cells are meeting, and then you have the judgment to and the courage to actually go and enforce the law and to reestablish a political order that does allow us to get along with self-government. Senator Schmitt, first of all, everyone needs to go out and get the book, The Last Line of Defense: How to Beat the Left in Court. Senator, thank you very much, one, for holding that hearing yesterday, and two, for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for all you do. Thanks for being there yesterday. You were great. Appreciate you.
Okay, now before we move on, I want to tell you something very, very important, and that is about preborn. Go to preborn.com/Knowles. We are living in a time when lies are easy and the truth is costly. Nowhere is that more devastating than in the battle for life. That is exactly what Natalia faced. When she first learned of her pregnancy, Natalia considered abortion influenced by the messaging that she had been exposed to all the time everywhere. But everything changed when she heard her baby's heartbeat. In that moment, she felt a divine calling to continue her pregnancy, trusting that God would make a way forward. Natalia chose life and found herself surrounded by the love, support, and resources she needed. At Preborn Network Clinics, this happens on average 200 times a day because of the support from people like you. Moms who are overwhelmed and pressured suddenly see their child, hear the truth, and realize they're not alone. That moment of truth costs just $28 to sponsor an ultrasound that will double the baby's chance at life. This is one of my favorite organizations. I personally support it. I encourage you to give what you can. It's not the time for silence. It's the time for courage, a time for truth, a time for life. Give now, dial pound 250, say keyword baby. That is pound 250, keyword baby, or visit preborn.com/Knowles, Knowles, preborn.com/Knowles. Now, speaking of very inflammatory political rhetoric coming from the left, and speaking of the left running away from their responsibility, J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, he thinks he's going to run for president. He's rich, so he thinks that that's going to allow him to run for president. He does not have a snowball's chance in hell, but he's pushing it anyway. He goes on Nicolle Wallace's show. Nicolle Wallace is one of the anchors in MSNBC, one of the most unpleasantly left-wing people, I think, in the entire country. J.B. Pritzker had the temerity, as did Nicolle Wallace for that matter, to say that no one has ever compared President Trump to Hitler.
I haven't suggested that Donald Trump is Hitler. I wouldn't say
I don't think any Democrat has.
The dangers that we saw in Nazi Germany are the dangers that we need to react to now. Well, I think everybody understands that at this point we've got an authoritarian in office. It doesn't take very long to tear apart a constitutional republic. Indeed, the Nazis did it in 53 days. That's not the country we live in. You shouldn't have to walk around with papers the way that they did in the early days of Nazi Germany. I do not invoke the specter of Nazis lightly. I'm watching with a foreboding dread what is happening in our country right now. A president who watches a plane go down in the Potomac and suggests without facts or findings that a diversity hire is responsible for the crash. The authoritarian playbook is laid bare here.
How can you possibly compare what happened in Germany in World War II to what's going on here in the United States?
Well, we're talking about the death of a constitutional republic. That's what happened in Germany in 1933, 1934. And we're seeing today that you've got an administration in Washington that's ignoring court orders.
Does J.B. Pritzker believe that we don't have film? That we don't have we might not have memories, but we do have film. When you are so loose with the Hitler comparisons that even Jake Tapper tries to rein you in, you've gone pretty loose. He thinks he's going to get away with this. Nicolle Wallace, too. But the thing is, you could make one of these compilation clips. That one came from Libs of TikTok. You could make one of these compilation clips for basically every single Democrat in the country. These people have spent a decade comparing Trump to Hitler. They didn't do that before he said he was going to seriously run for office, even though Trump was famous for almost a half century. They didn't do it then. Since he became a Republican, decided he was going to run for office, they've all been comparing him to Hitler. That's not interesting. We all know that. What's interesting is they're trying to run away from it now. Why? They're trying to run away from it now, I think, for the same reason that the Democrats barely showed up to that hearing yesterday, for the same reason there was a Cory Booker-shaped hole in the wall before the Jay Jones endorsement came up, for the same reason that they can't speak about this issue of political violence, because they know that they are responsible for it. That's what this is about. At this point, even the cooked BS numbers that don't count left-wing protests, that don't count BLM, that don't count Antifa violence, even putting their thumb on the scale as much as they can on that, even then, the numbers show that political violence is a left-wing problem. And how do you get the very near assassination of Trump, 2 attempted assassinations of Trump? How do you get to this place? Is by saying that your opponents are Nazis and Hitler. Jay Jones in Virginia said that his Republican opponent was breeding little fascists. One justification for why he wanted his opponent's kids to die in their mother's arms. To call someone Hitler is to justify that person's assassination. And they know, they see all the numbers, they see that they have a big political violence problem. They're going to try to run away from it. But they won't acknowledge the problem. If they just came out and they said, you know what, we really screwed up. We have justified the assassination of Republicans in this country for years by saying that they pose an existential threat to the Republic and by comparing them to Hitler. That's on us. Blood is on our hands. Mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. I'm sorry, we're going to turn another leaf. If they did what Cory Booker said in the abstract they should do, even though he won't do it himself, if they actually did that, I think they would have a shot at moving forward in a sincere, genuine way, at maybe persuading some people. Say, we'll tone down the rhetoric. But they can't acknowledge that they've done anything wrong. And so I think they're in a real bind here. Because people are sick of this. We do not want innocent people to be gunned down in the street for debating ideas. Charlie's assassination was a national trauma, and people have not gotten over it, nor should they get over it. And I'm not just talking about Republicans. I'm talking about people in the middle and on the center left, because they can see a direct line between the Democrats' rhetoric, the Democrats' encouragement of political violence, and the actual political violence that occurs. Now they want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to encourage the political violence. They want to say that they haven't done anything wrong, but they also want to persuade voters. All right, good. We're going to make a Hitler compilation video for every Democrat who tries to run away from this. Now, speaking of the apocalyptic, hyperbolic language of the left, and actually speaking of about faces, big about face from Bill Gates. You know, Bill Gates has been one of the horsemen of the apocalypse for many years now. It's the climate apocalypse. He's right up there with St. Greta of the Blessed Sailboat, saying that the world is going to end in 5 minutes because of the sun monster. It's happening. Big update in Bill Gates' letter, 3 Tough Truths About Climate. We'll get to that momentarily. First, I want to tell you about Shopify. Go to shopify.com/Knowles. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US. We even use it for our own DailyWire shop to make sure things are running smoothly and efficiently so that you get all the goods. Now, you might be asking, what if I can't design a website? What if I'm worried people haven't heard about my brand? Not a problem. Shopify has got you covered from the start with beautiful, ready-to-go templates that match your brand style and help you find your customers through easy-to-run email and social media campaigns. If you need a hand with everyday tasks, their AI tools created specifically for commerce can help enhance product images, write descriptions, and more. Plus, their award-winning customer support is available 24/7 to share advice if you ever get stuck. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Man, I've started a number of businesses over the years, and if Shopify had been around early on, can you imagine how magnificent that would be? Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/Knowles, K-N-O-W-L-E-S. Go to shopify.com/Knowles, K-N-O-W-L-E-S, shopify.com/Knowles. 3 tough truths about climate. I'm not going to read this. This is a very long missive put out by Bill Gates with all sorts of charts and whatever, blah, blah, blah. I'll just read you the first couple of paragraphs. There is a doomsday view of climate change that goes like this. In a few decades, cataclysmic climate change will decimate civilization. The evidence is all around us. Just look at all the heat waves and storms caused by rising global temperatures. Nothing matters more than limiting the rise in temperature. Put a pause right there. He says there's the doomsday view. That is the view that has been pushed by the entire left for 20 years. That is the sole view that has been pushed by the Bill Gateses and the AOCs and the King Charleses, for that matter, and the Al Gores and the Congress and the media and the academic establishment and the everyone has. But Bill Gates is trying to say, oh, there's a doomsday view. This is just one view. No, that's the one view. That is the one view that you have all been pushing for decades. So, by some measures, you would say for 50 years, since the 1970s. There's a doomsday view that says this, okay? Fortunately for all of us, this view is wrong. This is that's a nice little breakfast today. Fortunately for all of us, the view that the left has uniformly been promoting on the environment is wrong. So says one of the great spokesmen of this view. Although climate change will have serious consequences, particularly for people in the poorest countries, it will not lead to humanity's demise. People will be able to live and thrive in most places on Earth for the foreseeable future. Emissions projections have gone down with the right policies, blah, 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 blah. What? What the H is this about? What is this? Why is Bill Gates, one of the great promoters of climate hysteria on Earth for decades, why is he saying that they were wrong? Is it because he's come to see the light? Is it because he's been persuaded? Maybe he was listening to the Michael Knowles show. He said, that devilishly handsome Sicilian, he's persuaded me. No, I don't think that's what happened at all. I think what happened is the left is making a tactical pivot because time's up. And this is crazy. I hate to say I told you so. I think I actually predicted this on the show yesterday. And this had not come out yet. This is like an eerie, uncanny, numinous Nostradamus kind of moment. Because I said, look, time's up. You have AOC saying the world's going to end in 12 years. That was 9 years ago or something? 8 years ago. So, okay, we're getting close. Then Prince Charles, now King Charles, predicted that the world was going to end 7 years ago. That was the end. That was going to be the end of the world. That hasn't happened. Greta's moved on. She doesn't care about the climate anymore. Now she cares about the Palestinians. Now she wants to eradicate the nation state of Israel. Whatever. But she still wants to sail the boat. The boat is the through line through all of her activism. All these guys. The time is up. And so the libs have to make a little tactical move here. They have to say, okay, everything that we've been telling you is going to happen. It's not going to happen. And don't forget, the libs told you it was too late. When Al Gore made his stupid movie, the PowerPoint movie that won an Oscar, that had manifest lies in it, the thesis was, it is almost too late. And then we moved past the almost stage, so it was too late. It's all over. Nothing we can do to change it. We're screwed. But then we weren't screwed. Then everything was actually just fine. So they need to make a tactical shift. And they need to say, okay, well, the thing we told you was going to happen is not going to happen because of all our great policies. Hold on. You told me it was already too late. You told me no policies could change anything. Now you're claiming that your genius policies of what? Putting that stupid stop feature on cars that we all hate? Of what? Just sending all of our trash to China so that we can pretend that we don't have trash anymore? Of what? What do we do? Because of all our genius policies, we've pushed it off a little bit into the future. So the world's not going to end immediately. It'll end a little bit down the line. What Bill Gates is doing here, and you're going to see the whole left shift on this, is they have to recalibrate the issue of climate change. Because climate change, whatever that even means, is now and has always been a tool of political manipulation. It is a political slogan designed to play on people's anxieties. It is almost entirely divorced from natural science. Not entirely divorced from natural science. There's a little touch of it in there, but very, very little. So the problem for climate change as an issue for the Democrats is they've got to calibrate it perfectly. And they screwed this up a little bit in the 2000s. If you say it's all too late, we're totally screwed, well, now you've given up all your political leverage. If it's too late, then let's party. Burn some coal, baby. Let's go. If they say, well, it's way, way, way in the distant future, the environmental problems will be in the year 2800, then they've also given up all their political leverage. Because now there's no impetus to do anything. We'll figure it out down the line. Climate change only works if it is dialed in perfectly such that disaster, Armageddon, is just perfectly on the horizon. Not too close, not too far. That's what allows these systems of control. And they had that. They had tried to do that starting in the 1970s. But now we've just caught up with the horizon. We've been moving forward. So the only thing that they can do is either admit they were totally wrong or push it off, recalibrate, push it just perfectly into the future a little bit further. That's all that's going on here. I don't think anyone's learned anything. To me, this is just like the Democrats on Capitol Hill. No one's learned anything. No lessons have penetrated into the thick brow ridges covering up the purported minds of these people. They're just changing up the rhetoric a little bit. But on none of these issues, whether we're talking about the climate hysteria or political violence or anything in between, none of the substance is actually going to change on the left. Okay, now speaking of evolving leftist rhetoric, this is great. Auntie-Gate is upon us. Zohran Mamdani, the Muslim communist who is almost certainly going to be the next mayor of New York, unless the betting markets are now shifting a little bit because of Auntie-Gate. Zohran Mamdani made this claim just a few days ago about 9/11.
I want to use this moment to speak to the Muslims of New York City.
Oh, he's so choked up.
I want to speak to the memory of my aunt.
Oh, he can't even. He just loved his
who
aunt so
stopped
much.
taking the subway after September 11th because she did not feel safe in her hijab.
So, okay. Thesis. The real victims of 9/11 were Muslims who felt a little awkward in New York. And as he points to the example, he says, my aunt, she wore a hijab and she stopped taking the subway because she felt uncomfortable in her hijab. Okay. So the sleuths on the internet did a little fact check. And here we see that his aunt doesn't wear a hijab. His aunt, what is an aunt? That's going to be the next great Matt Walsh movie. What is an aunt? The sister of one's mother or father. Or a great aunt would be the sister of one's grandparents. They look through all the aunts they can find, and they find out that the aunt doesn't wear a hijab and doesn't live in New York. And didn't live in New York anytime around 9/11. The whole thing was totally made up. So what does Zohran do? Does Zohran admit that he lied? Or does he persist Tonight, Friendly Fire returns for episode 2. Join me, Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Andrew Klavan, and a special appearance from our newest Daily Wire host live, 7 p.m. Eastern on Daily Wire Plus. I would love to tell you exactly what's going to happen, but here's the truth. There's no script. There's no plan. There's no preparation whatsoever. It is 4 of the most trusted and downright sexy voices in conservative media, debating, discussing, disagreeing, while the entire internet watches and comments in real time. Watch Friendly Fire tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Daily Wire Plus. If you're not a member yet, join for as little as $7 a month with our deal of the decade at dailywire.com/subscribe. My favorite comment yesterday is from Mila Nelson, who says, the legitimate jump scare I had when Michael said Kourtney Kardashian wants you to do with her lollipop line of probiotics. Oh, yeah. Yeah. We don't need to rehash that. I had a jump scare too. Okay. Zohran says the real victims of 9/11 were Muslims who felt a little awkward sometimes, even though actually Americans' perceptions of Islam actually improved after 9/11. How insane is that? How insane is that? Our country is so stupidly nice that after 9/11, after Muslims in the name of Islam took down 2 of our buildings, killed 3,000 Americans, and hit the Pentagon. After that, we liked Islam more. We took in many more Muslims. Anyway, he says, we became so Islamophobic that my aunt felt awkward wearing a hijab on the subway. And we find out the aunt doesn't wear a hijab, didn't live in New York. Here's his correction.
I was speaking about my aunt. I was speaking about Zerafui, my father's cousin, who sadly passed away a few years ago. And for the takeaway from my more than 10-minute address about Islamophobia in this race and in this city to be the question of my aunt tells you everything about Andrew Cuomo and his inability to reckon with a crisis of his own.
My father's cousin, my aunt. Now, I don't know how they do things in Uganda or Tanzania or what, but in my understanding, it seems like Zohran has a reasonable hold on the English language. Your dad's cousin is not your aunt. She's your cousin. You know, you can have first cousins, second cousins. You can have a first cousin once removed. That's your father's first cousin. You can have, but you don't. I promise you, the cousin of your father is not your aunt. Even if you call her Zerafui ain't your aunt. But he says it as if there was no question. Well, of course. Yeah, I was talking about my father's cousin, my Zerafui. Why would Andrew Cuomo make an issue about this in the race? He said, because you lied. Well, one, because you said Muslims were the real victims of 9/11. You did a Norm Macdonald joke seriously, which is insane. And it is a disgrace that you could even potentially be the mayor of New York, quarter century after 9/11. But also because you lied. You made a stupid point that you lied about. And now you're talking about Zerafui, who conveniently will not speak for herself here. So then he goes on some other show, El Vacilón de la Mañana. And he tries to explain to a somewhat skeptical host the real nature of Zerafui.
I was at the press conference yesterday. They said, can you tell us who your aunt is, who you were referring to? I said, yes, this is my aunt. This is my Zerafui. This is my father's cousin. And this was her story.
So how can you convince New Yorkers if that is the type of person that you are? In other words, that you don't tell the truth?
Well, it's not a lie. My father's cousin is my aunt. That's how I referred to her growing up my whole life, Zerafui. And I think to have the takeaway from the New York Post and so many others after I gave a speech outside of a mosque for 10 minutes about the Islamophobia we've seen in this race and in our politics to be the question of whether or not Zerafui was my aunt.
I mean, Zerafui's my aunt. I called her my aunt. You know, if my aunt had testicles, she'd be my uncle, I guess. He's doing a version of that joke too now. He did the Norm joke. Now he's doing that joke. A lady is not your aunt simply because you call her that. Look, I'm Italian. We call people uncle and aunt pretty loosely, but we don't actually believe it. We don't say, oh, he's my uncle. You know, what if I did this bit? You know, Italians do this all the time. It's like your parents' friends. You call Uncle Johnny, Aunt so-and-so, Aunt Jackie. But you say, you know, after The Sopranos came out, It was a very traumatizing time for Italians. My Uncle Johnny wouldn't even take the subway wearing his velour tracksuit. He wouldn't. He felt too ashamed. My uncle, my sweet, beautiful uncle. Oh, no, he's my father's second cousin's barber. But no one would say that seriously. You lied. And now you're just repeating this phrase, Zerafui, like you're putting us into a trance. Zerafui, Gesundheit. Excuse, I'm talking about my aunt. Okay, all right, Zerafui. She is my father's cousin and therefore my aunt. And how dare you suggest otherwise? He lied. That's it. But he has learned one thing about being a New Yorker. I can tell you this. And for those who do not live in New York, you won't appreciate this. He learned the maxim, deny till you die. Which is not good. It's not a Christian principle. I don't encourage it. But it is very New Yorker. It's the most New Yorker thing I've seen about Zohran Mamdani, is you get caught in a lie and you just straight face it. No. What are you talking? No, I didn't lie. No, my neighbor is my aunt. No, it doesn't. What are you talking about? No, that my uncle is my aunt. No, what are you talking about? Are you crazy? It's pure gaslighting. Now, speaking of uncles becoming aunts and things like that, there is a key demographic that has just come out for Zohran. It's one that's often overlooked by politicians. That is, of course, trans rabbis.
Hi, Rabbi. Hi, Rabbi. Hi, Rabbi. Hi, Rabbi. Hi, Rabbi. Hi. We're among the thousands of Jewish New Yorkers who've been out door knocking and phone banking to elect Zohran Mamdani. We're also rabbis.
We know Zohran will fight to make our city affordable and safe for our families.
And for our neighbors of all faiths and backgrounds.
As New Yorkers, we're also just people who live here, who don't want to get priced out of this incredible city that we call home.
We know fellow Jews want to be able to afford housing, transportation, and childcare for their families too.
As Jews, as rabbis, as New Yorkers, we believe that all people deserve to thrive. Zohran agrees.
But let's get real. This isn't only about belief. It's about action. So let's build a flourishing city.
Together, let's elect Zohran. Zohran!
He's in. He's in, isn't he? I think, I sincerely would never want to make fun of a woman's appearance. I think, maybe the producers can correct me if I'm wrong, that one of them is not a woman, right? And the kind of irony, everyone's pointing to the trans rabbis for Zohran. How silly is that? The only one of those four people who might plausibly be an actual rabbi is the transsexual. Right? Ladies can't be rabbis. I'm sorry. This is like when I have to talk to my Episcopalian friends or my Anglican friends. I say, hey, ladies can't be priests. You know that, right? And I'm not a Jew, but I think I know enough about Judaism. I have many, many Jewish friends. I am extremely philo-Semitic. Ladies can't be rabbis. So oddly enough, the trans rabbi is he might be the most authoritative person up there. Will that push Zohran over? I think he's going to be the next mayor of New York, but I think I'm just going to have to go visit my beloved home city of New York less. That's too bad. I love New York. New York is great. Turning from Jews to Muslims before we go, Nigel Farage had a beautiful, that's kind of nice little horseshoe. We begin where we end where we began, because we'll move from the U.S. Capitol to the British Parliament. Nigel Farage absolutely smacks down the liberal Keir Starmer on the topic of Muslim immigration.
Nigel Farage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We at Reform, a party that is alive and kicking, very much enjoyed your speech on Monday. You seem to be learning a very great deal from us. But can I encourage you, please, to go further as a matter of national security? As a matter of national security. Over the weekend, an illegal immigrant from Iran, who we believe came by boat, was arrested in the north of England on serious charges of terrorism. Since the speech on Monday, 1,000 young, undocumented young males have crossed the English Channel. Does the Prime Minister agree? Now is the time to declare the situation in the English Channel as a national security emergency.
It wasn't my speech, it was the...
I don't want to do that, actually. Thank you so much, Nigel. Nigel doubling down. He says, hey, you've got to stop the mass migration into the UK. Now, this does represent a little bit of a shift in the way the UK has talked about this. You've seen it building since the Brexit, but let's be very clear I don't want to speak for Nigel, you can hear his own words, but let's be very clear what British conservatives are now saying. British conservatives are saying that the UK needs to severely limit immigration to England because those people are not English. It's not because of effects on the economy. It's not because they've committed some crimes. It's not because of this. It's not the argument being made, at least by the ordinary English conservative chap, is that you need to severely restrict immigration into England of non-English people because they are not English. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's okay to have a political identity. You don't want there to be cruelty about it. You don't want there to be nastiness or haughtiness about it. But it's okay for people to have their own country and their own culture. That's okay. Previously, it was very difficult to say that in mainstream Americans, certainly, and even British politics. And the reason why is something very strange had happened. America started out as a British colony. You had the United Kingdom and you had the American colonies. And then we fought the War of Independence. I have a new video out that's being produced by the White House, actually, on the American War of Independence and my ancestor. Good to go check out on the White House YouTube channel. But anyway, we had a War of Independence, and over time, it flipped. And what's weird is that now America is the empire, the global empire, and the UK is kind of a colony of America, which means that they take on some of our weird traits. Like, for instance, America, especially in the 20th century, came to say that we're multicultural and, we're not any particular people. We're just a land of immigrants or something. And it was a plausible argument to make in America because America was settled only 400 years ago. It wasn't settled by Tanzanians, for instance, but there have been, different kinds of people who have come here over the years. That isn't really true in the UK. I mean, I guess there was the Norman Conquest in 1066, but the Brits are a people. The English come from the Angles. So it's very weird to read and hear, as you have in recent years, that the UK is a multicultural, multi-ethnic melting pot that has no original stock or something. I remember when I was writing Speechless, I remember I would be reading this in all sorts of, hello, where is my bell? No, they're asleep on the wheel today. Thank you. Wow, it's really, I'm glad I woke up Mr. Davies from his nap. When I was reading these books from the 90s and 2000s on speech in the UK, and they say, oh, well, look, other countries of the world are ethnic states, unlike America and England. So no, I'm pretty sure England is an ethnic state. At least it used to be. That's what's shifted. Now, will that shift in America? Will we? I don't know. But at least in the UK, there is a shift. No. It's not that these people are bad intrinsically or morally evil. It's just they're not English, and we want England to be English. Is that so much to ask for? That's a radical shift, a radical return to how English politics always was. Okay, today is Tee Tuesday. On Wednesday. How weird is that? It's Wednesday. I don't know what we'll call it to make it alliterative. The rest of the show continues now. You do not want to miss it. Become a member. Use code Knowles at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans.